President John F. Kennedy Jr. was shot today at 12:33 p.m. in Dallas, Texas. These words were spoken by Walter Cronkite of CBS News, the most trusted news anchor in America. This assassination was a flashbulb moment for the American Republic. And in fact, it was one of the seminal moments. It is my thesis that the assassination of President John F. Kennedy Jr. was a seminal moment in modern American history because it led to the credibility gap between the U.S. government and the American people and the decline of faith in America's broader institutions, such as the media. In this short video essay, I will be talking about the socio-cultural aspects behind this assassination, this political event. And I'll also be describing the analysis of why this matters to our class. The day of the assassination. A light rain was falling on Friday morning. Crowds of excited people lined the streets and waved to the Kennedys. The presidential motorcade, turned off on Main Street at Dealey Plaza around 12:30 p.m. As it was passing the Texas School Book Depository, gunfire suddenly reverberated in the plaza. Bullets struck the president's neck and head, and he slumped over, dead, towards Mrs. Kennedy. As I said before, this was a momentous day. On television, it was particularly gruesome. We saw the young Mrs. Kennedy trying to pick up the pieces of the dead president's head from off of the car. The historical and social context. During this time, it was the time of the Cold War, which was the USSR, or the Soviet Republic of Russia, versus the USA, the good old USA. President John F. Kennedy had come into power and immediately had launched the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a half-baked plan to retake the island of Cuba from Fidel Castro using dissidents that had fled after the revolution in Cuba. It was also the time of the John Birch Society, which was a radical fringe group that actually helped in 1964 launch the campaign of Barry Goldwater, the most reactionary presidential candidate until Trump. During this time, the CIA, who were heavily involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion, had lost their ally in John F. Kennedy. In fact, John F. Kennedy had said, "I would like to burn the CIA into 1,000 pieces of ash." And we must not forget that this was the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was the closest we have ever come to nuclear war between two superpowers. So, after the death of John F. Kennedy, President Lyndon B. Johnson set up the Warren Commission, which was headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren, a former California governor as well, to delve into the who, what, where, when, and why, and how did this happen. And using this primary source, the key findings were that Lee Harvey Oswald had fired 3 shots at President John F. Kennedy, with the 3rd shot killing him. And that it is also probable, based on scientific acoustical evidence, that there were 2 gunmen. And this is where the conspiracy theories start. Because the committee was not able, based on the evidence, to see if the Soviet government or the Cuban government or anti-Castro groups or organized crime had any motive, were involved in any specific way, people started looking for evidence that proved their own conclusions. It was also found that the Secret Service had been deficient in their duties and that they had in their possession information that was not properly analyzed. and that the CIA had information that was also not properly analyzed. So, as I said before, this is where a lot of the roots of distrust come from. After the assassination and what some people consider the cover-up, based on classified documents that the Warren Commission to this day has still not released, people started filling in the gaps. Now, this has always been a strain that has been present in the American political body. In one of the most famous essays, the political theorist Richard Hofstadter, in his seminal article, The Paranoid Style in American Politics, quoted Joseph R. McCarthy. Quote, "How can we account for our present situation unless we believe that men high in this government are conspiring to deliver us to disaster? This must be the product of a great conspiracy on a scale so immense as to dwarf any previous such venture in the history of man. A conspiracy of infamy so black that, which it is finally exposed, its principles shall be forever deserving of the maledictions of all honest men. What can be made of this unbroken series of decisions and acts contributing to the strategy of defeat? They cannot be attributed to incompetence. The laws of probability would dictate that part of the decisions would serve the country's interest." End quote. Now, Joseph R. McCarthy was talking about the Red Scare that took place during the 1950s against dissidents or Hollywood figures that had leftist political ideas. But the same paranoid style has been applied to the JFK assassination, to September 11th, to immigration with the rise of what people call the Great Replacement theory. This strain of paranoid thinking has been ever present. And people still want to fill in these gaps, as I said before. In Oliver Stone's JFK, a movie that, while gripping and very dramatic and has very interesting ideas, he did create characters out of whole cloth, such as Mr. X, that have no basis in reality, but many people believe actually exist. In fact, this is what we would call the rise of counter-narratives and disinformation. In the Culture of Narcissism by Christopher Lasch, he says, and I quote, "Our growing dependence on technologies no one seems to understand or control has given rise to feelings of powerlessness and victimization. We find it more and more difficult to achieve a sense of continuity, permanence, or connection with the world around us. Relationships with others are notably fragile. Goods are made to be used up and discarded. Reality is experienced as an unstable environment of flickering images. Everything conspires to encourage escapist solutions to the psychological problems of dependence, separation, and individuation, and to discourage the moral realism that makes it possible for human beings to come to terms with existential constraints on their power and freedom." The reason that I quote this is that people need to fill in the gaps, and they want the truth, or what they consider the truth. And the JFK assassination is a place where they really want to have the truth. Now, why did I choose this particular moment for our class, this event? As I said, this is a flashbulb moment, which, I quote, "A flashbulb memory is an accurate and exceptionally vivid, long-lasting memory for the circumstances surrounding learning about a dramatic event. Flashbulb memories are memories that are affected by our emotional states," end quote. What could be something that affects our emotional states than seeing the President of the United States shot dead on live television? It was the end of innocence for America. It really is the foundational conspiracy theory of the modern age. And it led to, what I said, the rise of counter-narratives. Also, this is a moment where if your narrator is of a certain age, you can say, "Where were you?" to them, and they'll know exactly where they were. It's one of their defining moments. So, in conclusion, why is this important? It's because of the decline in trust in the American institutions. And it's important because of the flashbulb memory aspect for our class. According to a Pew Research Center, over 2/3 of Americans distrust the government, distrust the media, distrust almost all institutions in our American nation. This is not a good place to be. And it's something that needs to be changed. But the only way to do that is for the truth to be available. Right now, we're dealing with conspiracy theories, stolen elections, ballot harvesting, QAnon, people like Alex Jones. And we need to be mindful that this will always exist with us. But the only way to solve it is through the truth. Thank you.